Well, to bring us up to date with both sides of the trophy imports debate, I'm joined by my guest panel. Steve Scott is producer and host of the Safari Hunters Journal and Outdoor Guide television series. He joins us from Oklahoma City and supports lifting the ban. And with me in the studio is Masha Kalinina. She's a trade policy specialist with Humane Society International, which is campaigning to end trophy hunting. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start with you, Steve. In terms of the economic impact of big game hunting and its related wildlife tourism, how does lifting the ban hurt or help these local economies whose livelihoods are tied to it?
Well, Rochelle, it helps the economies of the local people immensely. The ability to bring jobs, to bring foreign exchange into areas that are typically not gone to by normal tourists. It generates a significant amount of income and jobs for people. And in addition to that, it provides a significant amount of healthy protein that surprisingly is missing from most rural Africans' diets.
And Masha, what's your take on this, on the economic impact?
We did a study last year looking at 8 countries in Africa, and we found that on average annually $17 billion is contributed by overall tourism. Trophy hunting is about 0.78%, so very small sum. Let's talk about jobs, for example. Overall tourism annually, 2.6 million jobs from overall tourism. And then trophy hunting is about 7,500 or even less employment. The meat issue is interesting. No one eats lion, no one eats leopard in Africa. The Africans don't need meat handouts. What they need are jobs. So I'll give you one other example, which is you have a hunting operator that may be functioning for one hunting season. They could bring maybe 30 hunters, but then the same tourism operator can bring 2,600 people. Now, you tell me, who brings more jobs into the community?
So, Steve, given that response then, in terms of how we should look at this then, we're looking at jobs, we're also looking at the economic impact there. Should there be then a threshold for allowing some big game hunting, or do we even still need it?
Well, we do need it because what she's doing is cherry picking the data. Sure, there are more jobs in ecotourism than there are in hunting, but where the jobs are located, that's the issue. There are no tourism jobs to speak of in Ghana Reserve. There are very few tourism jobs in Hwange National Park. There are some, but not a lot in the more rural areas, and that's where the rubber meets the road for trophy hunting and the benefits that it provides to the people. There's a balance of both. There's room, there's a place for ecotourism, there's a place for trophy hunting, and both go to benefit wildlife. It's like if you're building a house, you shouldn't be required to choose between a hammer or a saw. Both work together to achieve an end.
And Masha, do you think that there could be a balance?
Well, I'd like to address one point, which is if you actually go to the websites of the trophy hunting operators, which I do as part of my job, you will see that most of them are located on the outskirts of national parks, outside of Hwange, outside of Kruger, because they are dependent on these healthy ecosystems to supply this endless conveyor belt of wildlife for hunters to slaughter. So no, I mean, maybe just a few, maybe 1% of these operators are in these like remote destinations that Steve is talking about. The majority are actually capitalizing on the very places where tourists are going.
Now, Steve, I also want to talk about the role of private companies. We even saw some airlines refusing to transport some of these trophies. So what role can and should the private sector have in voicing their opinions on this issue?
Well, they're entitled to do that, and there's a long history of private companies and individuals that influence public policy. They have the right to do that. We also have the right to boycott those institutions, and the people that participate in legally regulated hunting. There are millions of us. We're responsible for about $500 million of foreign exchange in the African continent on an annual basis. And we vote with our dollars as well. And it's surprising to me that people look at this just from And I guess it's probably not surprising for me that people look from just an emotional perspective. When you look at the science, you realize that hunting provides a benefit not only to the people, but to the wildlife. Your report spoke about the populations of elephants in Zimbabwe, and it's exactly true. There's 83 to 85,000 elephants with a carrying capacity of 45 to 50. There are more elephants in Zimbabwe than they know what to do with. And the hunting quota is 400 to 500, and annually about 250 elephants are taken each year. That's less than 0.25%, but the economic impact is huge.
And Masha, what's your response to that, as well as what role private companies should have in this?
Well, maybe that's one thing Steve and I do agree on, is that that's their prerogative. They have the right to restrict transport of trophies, and 45 airlines have in fact done that very thing. We as consumers also can boycott. Sponsors of Safari Club International, a pro-trophy hunting lobby group that basically, has our Fish and Wildlife Service in a grip at the moment, calling on the lifting of import restrictions into this country. And there are private sector companies that support this kind of group. They support their Las Vegas convention, and so we have the right to boycott these private sector companies as well. What Steve has cited, the numbers of how much the trophy hunters bring into African communities, that's from a Safari Club International study that was based on surveys they sent out to hunters, where they were basically self-reporting what they spend. So there's also some dubious data there being reported that we take very serious issue with.
Now, Steve, what about how the big game industry is regulated in other countries? How warranted are some of the concerns about regulation in this space?
Well, it's not a major concern because the transfer of trophies, the quotas that are set are governed by CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. So it's not like Tanzania can just decide, well, we're going to set a quota of 50,000 elephants this year in order to generate more income. It just doesn't work that way. Hunting is regulated throughout the world, and especially this kind of hunting. And there are stipulations in Europe, in Asia, in the United States, all over the world. And there's not a need for additional regulation because it's one of the most regulated industries in the world.
Can I give you an example of why additional regulation is absolutely needed? CITES, for example, has a export quota on leopard trophies. That is determined by the parties to this UN convention. Now, recently, this quota has been under evaluation because it was very high. There were really serious concerns. Are there enough leopards to sustain this kind of offtake for hunting? And what we found is that South Africa in 2015 and 2016 prohibited exports of leopard trophies because they simply don't have an accurate count of this population. Can you have a sustainable quota that is completely legitimate under CITES, this UN convention, if you have South Africa admitting that they essentially don't have the proper data? Now, other countries who also have a quota under the CITES convention are now saying, we don't have any leopards left. We want our quota completely removed from the CITES context because we cannot allow an offtake any longer of leopards. So that's when you can have import restrictions from the importing side, because they will be looking at the science and evaluating whether the offtake is sustainable. And in the US, we have a higher standard. The offtake has to actually enhance the survival of the species, not just net neutral impact, enhance. And that is not being met presently by the majority of the trophies that are coming into this country.
Well, unfortunately, we'll have to give it there. A big thank you to Steve Scott of Safari Hunters Journal and Outdoor Guide, and Masha Kalinina with Humane Society International. Thank you both.